Welcome, everyone. Today we are going to talk about what really happens behind the locked doors of a high-security psychiatric hospital, not just the patients inside, but the system itself. But before we proceed, don't forget to subscribe for more chilling tales. Drop your location in the comments. We want to know where you're listening from. This is Silence After the Screams, your weekly dose of spine and chilling true crime. Like and subscribe so you never miss what's coming next. There is a place people avoid naming out loud, not because they do not know it exists, but because knowing feels like an invitation to fear. It sits far from city noise, hidden behind tall fences and older trees. A place where silence feels enforced rather than natural, and where every locked door carries a reason. They call it Ashcombe Secure Hospital. To the public, it is spoken about like a prison, a final destination for people the world has decided it can no longer understand or control. To the government, it is a hospital, a place of treatment, recovery, and safety. To the people who work there, it is something far more complicated, a fragile balance between care and control, between compassion and survival. Ashcombe is home to men who have done things most people cannot imagine. Acts that dominate headlines and define lives in a single sentence. But it is also home to men who are broken in quieter ways. People whose crimes are tangled with illness, trauma, and years of untreated damage. Inside these walls, the line between monster and patient blurs, until it becomes uncomfortable to look at directly. For over a century, Ashcombe has existed under strict secrecy. Staff are trained not to speak about it outside the gates. Some do not even tell friends where they work, choosing vague answers that invite fewer questions. It is easier that way. Once people know, curiosity turns invasive, and judgment arrives before explanation. The gates open only for those cleared to enter. And once inside, personal identity fades quickly. Bags are searched, phones are locked away, names are replaced with protocols. Everyone who crosses the threshold leaves part of their outside life behind. Cameras watch everything. Every corridor, every door, every movement is tracked and recorded, not out of mistrust, but necessity. Inside Ashcombe, safety depends on precision. Patients cannot move freely. Wards are divided by risk, stability, and history. Some men are allowed to walk with supervision. Others are locked behind reinforced doors, emerging only when enough staff are present to control what might happen next. Violence is never far away. For the staff, this is not theoretical. Assaults happen weekly. Punches, kicks, thrown objects, boiling liquids, and sometimes worse. Every interaction carries an unspoken question. Will this moment stay calm? Or will it turn without warning? Despite this, many of the nurses, psychologists, and doctors return every day, not because the work is easy, but because they believe something difficult yet necessary happens here. They believe that even the most dangerous people are still human, still capable of change, even if that change takes years or never fully arrives. The patients, however, live in a different reality. Take Ethan Cross, for example. At 25, Ethan had already spent most of his adult life behind locked doors. He arrived at Ashcombe after a prison unit could no longer manage him. Violence followed him everywhere, sudden and explosive, often without warning. Diagnosed with severe mental illness and a complex personality disorder, Ethan heard voices that told him people were threats, that danger was constant, that attacking first was the only way to survive. When he first arrived, he was placed on the admissions ward, the most restrictive part of the hospital. His room was bare. His time outside it was limited. Medication dulled the edges of his thoughts, but it did not silence them. Without it, he was considered too dangerous to leave isolation. Ethan spoke softly when he talked about the past, often avoiding specifics, as if naming them might make them real again. He described moments where reality blurred, where fear became certainty, and certainty turned violent. He did not excuse what he had done, but he struggled to explain it. Trapped between guilt and confusion, on the intensive care ward, every door required multiple staff to open. Even a simple request, like asking for a drink, followed strict procedure. No movement happened casually. Every decision weighed risk against necessity. Progress at Ashcombe was slow. Patients moved between wards like pieces in a dangerous game, advancing when stable, falling back when illness or behavior resurfaced. Some reached rehabilitation wards where they could work, study, and even shop under supervision. Others remained stuck, cycling through treatment without clear improvement. Then there was Daniel Mercer. Daniel arrived at Ashcombe at 14, after a violent act that shocked even experienced professionals. No one expected someone so young, from a stable background, to be capable of such harm. Now in his 20s, Daniel lived on a rehabilitation ward, where he found an unexpected outlet in art. Drawing became the only way he could process emotions he did not fully understand. Anger, guilt, remorse, confusion, all poured onto paper because speaking them felt impossible. His artwork reflected time lost, childhood frozen, and the weight of an act he still struggled to face directly. Daniel's family never abandoned him. That, too, confused people. Society expects families to turn away after certain crimes, but they stayed, believing their son was more than the worst thing he had ever done. Their support became part of his treatment, a fragile lifeline in a place where hope is often scarce. Ashcombe was full of stories like these. Men who were offenders and victims at the same time. Men shaped by abuse, neglect, addiction, and untreated illness. Men who frightened others, and men who were terrified themselves. The hospital existed not to erase responsibility, but to confront it in a way prison never could. Treatment here had no release date. Progress was measured in behavior, insight, and risk reduction, not time served. And yet, despite everything, one truth hovered over Ashcombe like a shadow. Not everyone would get better. Some would remain dangerous forever. And everyone inside, staff and patients alike, lived with that knowledge every single day. Life inside Ashcombe Secure Hospital follows a rhythm that feels unnatural to anyone new. A routine designed not for comfort, but for survival. Every day begins the same way, not with freedom or choice, but with checks, counts, and careful observation. Doors open on strict schedules. Medication is dispensed under watchful eyes. Even silence is monitored, because quiet can mean calm, or it can mean something is about to go wrong. For the patients, time does not move forward in a straight line. Days blend into one another, measured not by dates or seasons, but by progress reviews, incident reports, and medication adjustments. Some men mark time by how often they are allowed outside. Others count how many weeks have passed without restraint, without violence, without losing control. For the staff, vigilance never switches off. Every interaction is assessed for risk, every word chosen carefully, because a misplaced phrase or a sudden gesture can turn a calm moment into chaos. Nurses are trained to notice the smallest changes. A clenched jaw, a restless step, a shift in tone, because these signs often arrive seconds before an outburst. Ethan Cross remained one of the most closely monitored patients. Despite medication, his moods fluctuated sharply, swinging between withdrawn silence and explosive anger. Some days he refused to leave his room, convinced the outside world was hostile. Other days he paced the corridors under escort, muttering to himself, eyes darting toward shadows only he could see. Therapy sessions with Ethan were difficult and slow. He spoke about fear more than anything else, a constant sense that he was under attack, even in moments of safety. When asked about the violent acts that brought him to Ashcombe, his voice dropped, his words tangled, as if revisiting those memories risked pulling him back into them. The clinicians believed Ethan was capable of improvement, but only if stability could be maintained long enough for real insight to form. That stability was fragile. One afternoon, during a routine escort, something shifted. It began with a misunderstanding, a simple instruction Ethan believed was a threat. His breathing changed. His posture stiffened. Staff recognized the signs and attempted de-escalation, speaking calmly, keeping distance. But fear does not respond to reason when it takes control. The incident escalated quickly. Within seconds, alarms sounded. Doors locked automatically, and trained response teams moved in. Ethan fought with desperate intensity, driven not by malice, but terror. It took multiple staff members to restrain him safely, each movement carefully controlled to prevent serious injury. When it was over, the corridor was silent again, but the tension lingered. Incidents like this reinforced a reality everyone at Ashcombe understood too well. Treatment was possible, but never guaranteed. Progress could be erased in a moment. On a different ward, Daniel Mercer's days followed a quieter pattern. His rehabilitation unit allowed more freedom, more responsibility, and more opportunity to practice life skills under supervision. Daniel attended structured activities, art sessions, and group therapy, where patients discussed accountability, impulse control, and the impact of their actions. Daniel rarely spoke during these sessions. Instead, he listened, absorbing the words of others, his expression unreadable. When he did speak, his comments were careful and restrained, revealing glimpses of remorse without fully opening the door to what lay beneath. His artwork, however, spoke freely. Drawings covered his room. Images of broken clocks, locked doors, and figures trapped between childhood and adulthood. Therapists used his art to understand emotions he struggled to verbalize, recognizing it as both a coping mechanism and a form of progress. Not all patients engaged with treatment. Some rejected it entirely, refusing medication, refusing therapy, rejecting any suggestion that they needed help. These men often remained on the most secure wards, cycling through restraint, isolation, and brief periods of calm that never lasted. For them, Ashcombe was not a place of recovery, but containment. Staff carried the weight of these realities home with them, though many tried not to show it. Relationships outside the hospital suffered. Sleep became difficult. The constant exposure to violence, trauma, and fear left marks that were not always visible. Yet they returned. They returned because leaving felt like abandoning something important. Because even in the darkest cases, moments of humanity still appeared. A patient apologizing after an outburst, a breakthrough in therapy, a drawing finished, a week without incident. These moments were small, but they mattered. As months passed, Ashcombe continued its careful balancing act, holding danger at bay while pushing for progress wherever it could be found. Reviews were conducted, reports were written, decisions were debated in quiet rooms far from the wards. But beneath the routine, beneath the structure and control, a growing tension began to form. Because one case, buried deep within the hospital's history, was about to resurface, and when it did, it would force Ashcombe to confront a question it had avoided for years. Not whether people could be treated, but whether some doors, once opened, should ever be unlocked again. The file had been sitting in Ashcombe's archives for years, buried beneath layers of reviews, assessments, and decisions made by people who no longer worked there. It was not forgotten, exactly, but it was avoided, referenced only in quiet conversations and footnotes, because reopening it meant reopening doubts that had never been fully resolved. The case belonged to Leonard Hale. Leonard had arrived at Ashcombe decades earlier, transferred from prison after repeated violent incidents that could no longer be explained away as discipline problems or defiance. He had been diagnosed with a severe psychiatric disorder that distorted his perception of reality, convincing him that others were plotting against him even in moments of calm. His crimes were serious, his history long, and his presence had shaped policies that were still in use long after he stopped being mentioned by name. For years, Leonard lived in the most secure part of the hospital, moving through treatment with minimal visible progress. Staff learned how to manage him rather than change him, relying on structure, medication, and distance to keep everyone safe. Over time, Incidents decreased, not because his illness disappeared, but because Ashcombe learned how to contain it. Then, slowly, something changed. Leonard aged. The aggression softened. The outbursts became less frequent. Assessments began to include cautious language. Phrases like improved insight and reduced risk. Review boards debated his future in rooms far removed from the wards, weighing public safety against the possibility that decades of treatment had finally made a difference. Some staff believed he had earned a chance to move forward. Others believed time had simply worn him down. The decision to adjust Leonard's security level did not come suddenly. It was built over years of reports, observations, and pressure to demonstrate that Ashcombe was not a place people entered and never left. When he was transferred to a less restrictive ward, the reaction inside the hospital was divided. For some, it represented progress. For others, it felt like a gamble. Ethan Cross watched these changes closely. By now, Ethan had stabilized enough to leave the admissions ward. Though he remained under close supervision, he understood, better than most, how fragile stability could be. Seeing Leonard move more freely unsettled him, not because he feared Leonard personally, but because it forced him to confront an uncomfortable truth about his own future. If Leonard could progress, then so could Ethan. And if Leonard could fail, then so could he. Daniel Mercer reacted differently. Daniel followed the rules carefully, not out of fear, but out of an almost desperate need to believe in the system. He believed Ashcombe existed to make sense of what had happened to him, to turn chaos into structure, guilt into accountability. Leonard's progression reinforced his hope that change was real. That effort mattered. Then came the incident. It did not happen dramatically. There were no warning signs that fit neatly into reports. It began as a routine interaction, an ordinary moment inside a place built to prevent exactly what followed. Something in Leonard shifted. Subtle and sudden, a misinterpreted gesture, a perceived threat that only existed in his mind. Staff responded immediately, following training, using techniques designed to prevent harm. But prevention is not perfection. The situation escalated faster than expected, and in the brief window where control slipped, the reality Ashcombe feared most reappeared. The incident was contained quickly, but the damage it caused reached far beyond the room where it occurred. No one died, but no one could ignore what had happened. The aftermath rippled through the hospital, forcing emergency reviews, renewed restrictions, and difficult conversations about responsibility. The question everyone avoided resurfaced with renewed urgency. How do you measure risk when lives are at stake? Leonard was returned to higher security. The language of progress disappeared from his file, replaced by caution and restraint. For some staff, the incident confirmed long-held fears. For others, it represented a failure of judgment rather than treatment. Ashcombe stood at a crossroads. Public attention intensified. Oversight committees demanded answers. Families of patients and victims alike questioned whether the balance between care and safety had tilted too far in one direction. Inside the hospital, morale fractured. Some staff felt betrayed by a system that asked them to manage impossible contradictions. Others doubled down on the belief that abandoning treatment altogether would be a greater failure. The weight of responsibility grew heavier, pressing into every decision, every review, every unlocked door. Ethan's progress stalled under the renewed restrictions, his fear reignited by the reminder of how quickly things could change. Daniel retreated inward, his artwork darkening, his hope shaken but not entirely extinguished. Ashcombe continued, because it had to. The hospital did not exist to offer easy answers. It existed because society needed somewhere to place people it feared but could not abandon. It existed because prisons were not enough, and because doing nothing was not an option. But Ashcombe also existed as a warning. That treatment is not a guarantee. That control is not the same as safety. That compassion and danger can occupy the same space. In the end, the gates still opened every morning. and they still closed every night. Staff returned. Patients remained. Decisions continued to be made behind closed doors. And a question that haunted Ashcombe never truly left. Not whether people could change, but whether the world would ever accept the cost of trying.